Hey guys, it's Leslie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do two mini book reviews. So let's just get started because I have to go get my kid in 10 minutes. So this has got to be a one take kind of video. But the first book I want to talk about is The Journey That Saved Curious George by Louise Borden. And this is it's kind of fitted in here. It's a kid's book, it's a children's book about the authors of the Curious George series books and of Margaret, you can see down here, Ray, and her husband H.A. Ray, who is Hans Ray. And this book, I just sort of happened upon it when I was searching for probably some other World War II book, and I was like, what is this about? And truthfully, I had no idea about the origins of Curious George or the authors, and they happen to be German Jews, and just a quick synopsis is that they were living in Paris at the time of the Nazi occupation, so early 1940, and they left really abruptly, and the story is they had to ride their bikes from Paris all the way to the south of Paris, and I can't remember exactly the city, or Lyon maybe, could be something else, but to catch a train basically to get out of the country. So to Spain, to Portugal, and to Brazil, where they actually were citizens of Brazil because they had lived there and they actually got married there. And their story is just really fascinating. Hans in particular, he actually served with the German army in World War I, and he was an accomplished illustrator, and he could speak 5 languages. There's just it's just so interesting. And this is the part of the Holocaust and the atrocities of the Nazis that are just so devastating that, could have lost Curious George. And just the brilliance of these two people. And they ended up getting to the United States, and Curious George, the first book, was published, I believe, in 41 or 42. It was early, and it was during the war. And obviously their books have touched generations after generations after generation. And I don't know, I just really liked it. Even though it is definitely written for kids, very simple sentences, but it shows pictures from Curious George itself, but also other writings and books that mostly Hans did by himself. And there's just pictures that Margaret took from, the 1940s and earlier. There's letters and writings from their publishers. It was just really, really a good book. I'm pleased that I just happened upon it. And if you're interested in World War II history, or you have children, or you're a teacher, I think this is a really great book. And clearly it was at my library, so it could be at yours too. The second book I actually listened to on an audiobook, and it was called GI Brides by Duncan Barrett and Nuala Culvey. I think that's how you say her name. And this is basically what the title says. It's about British women who married American GIs during World War II and their lives after that. So all of them. It follows 4 women. Margaret, Ray, Gwendolyn, and what's the last one's name? Sylvia. And they all marry men, and they move to the United States, and each of their journeys are different. So the book follows one girl per chapter, and it spreads them out through the whole book. And there's an epilogue, so it kind of talks about the ends of their lives and their marriage. And the book was, to me, just fascinating. And it wasn't just necessarily because it was a World War II thing, even though, they talk about the time period and just the interesting parts of living and having, being an early married couple in the 40s. And that's just interesting in itself. But the book was a really interesting examination of marriage. And what I really loved was how resilient and powerful these women were in their own right. Most of them, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but the 3 of the 4 marriages were awful. And even the 4th one had some things that I know as a married woman would never have put up with. It's a different time. It's just a different time, and the way that women are treated like have their own rights and all of that now is just very different than the 40s. But these women were tough, and I admire that so much. And what they did for their kids and for themselves is pretty amazing. And there were little tidbits throughout the book that I found really interesting, like in particular talking about agriculture in the South in the 1940s. I mean, slavery had been over in the US for almost 100 years at this point, and the fact that World War II was destroying Southern farmers' like businesses because they didn't have anyone to pick the cotton. I mean, I was thinking like, where's the cotton gin? I thought they had, like farm equipment. And in this one example, they were saying that this one farmer had the only tractor in the entire county. So they still were using like manual labor to do a lot of, whatever, planting and reaping and sowing or whatever the terms are for farming. But I was like astounded, and I'm like, no wonder the race relations and that in the US, in particular in the United States and the South, have taken a very long time to grow, like, and to heal from slavery and all the repercussions. And still, we're like still a long way away from, a good place. And I found that really fascinating because clearly I was completely dumbfounded that farming in the 1940s was still mostly done by hand. I could not believe that. And that was kind of a wake-up call for me. And just like how people would still look at Black people, because at that time they still did a lot of the manual labor jobs. That was what was available to them in the South. So that was completely astounding to me. It's clearly showing my ignorance, but also that's what reading does. It teaches you things that you had never learned before, which is why I love reading. And in particular, I love reading nonfiction. And this book was just like a page turner. For being a nonfiction story, I was just like sucked into these women's lives and the situations they had to go through and dealing with serious topics that honestly transcend time as far as relationships go. Alcoholism, gambling, finances, raising children, in-laws, like these things that you still deal with today. Like, that is not anything new. Yes, it may have been worse then, and clearly the options for women during that time were much more limited than they are now, but I don't know, like it was just so interesting, and I really liked it. If you're interested in marriage or just living like in the 1940s, raising a family at that time, I highly recommend this story. Like I said, I listened to it on audiobook, and I think it took me like a day and a half to listen to it because I was just so engrossed. I wanted to know what happened to Ray and Sylvia and Margaret and Gwendolyn. So really highly recommend that. The writing was obviously captivating, and I think it really told an interesting story. The one maybe negative I would have is that because of the nature of the book, it's talking about GI brides, so like British women marrying American men. I feel like it made American men look really awful, which, I mean, there's obviously some truth to that, but it's not to say that these women may not have married equally awful British men or other nationalities. So I guess you have to take that bit with a grain of salt, but overall that didn't really bother me that much. But it was kind of like apparent. I'm like, are these people trying to say that American men are that crappy? Maybe, but it's not just American men are not the worst husbands. That can't be true. So just take that with a little bit of, I don't know, take it how you will, I guess. But those are the two books that I've read in the past week and both really enjoyed. Clearly on this channel, you are going to hear about World War II. That's what I like. It's always what draws me in when I'm in a bit of a reading slump. And I did start Origin, though, by Dan Brown, which I have checked out and returned a couple of times to the library. But I'm telling you, like, within the first, 6 pages of a Dan Brown book, you're just hooked in. You want to know what's happening, and I love that about his writing. So I am looking forward to really getting into that, but I got a little distracted by that audiobook. I hope everyone's having a great week. I can't believe we're already mid-June, but I gotta go get my kid now. So have a great week, and I'll see you later.